You have started the recording, Manji, right?
Yeah, I have started the recording from my end.
Okay.
And I think Shabna has also started.
Yes.
Yeah. Amanjot, over to you. Please begin. The participants and the speakers are waiting.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to the learning series session 9 on local climate action plan prioritization and market outlook. So I think most of us has already joined, and we can start the session. So for most information that I want to give here is that this webinar is being recorded and the records will be available in public domain. My name is Amanjot Kaur and I am associate with Climate Center for Cities at National Institute of Urban Affairs. I welcome you all to the 9th session of Learning Series. This being organized by Climate Centers for Cities in collaboration with World Resource Institute, India. Before we begin, I would like to request our participants to please mention their name and email ID in the chat box. We will share more details on this event and the upcoming events as well. So, well, as I've already mentioned, our session is on the local climate action plan prioritization and the market outlook. So our focus will be on ways to mitigate GHG emissions in cities for this session. We'll be focusing on activities that help to reduce the rate or the magnitude of climate change by reducing the human-generated greenhouse gas emissions. So it's evident that increased in GHG emissions affecting our cities and at the global level, the most evident and recent examples ranges from the Death, Death Valley like temperatures in Canada and to rain-filled subways cars in central China and New York subway stations recently. And the recent IPCC report confirmed that the 95% of search about the human activities responsible for global warming and rise in global temperature and its adverse local effects that will threat majority of cities in developing nations, including India. With current business as usual, India will experience frequent extreme events like droughts, cyclones, heat waves, floods, even to the sea level rise and the submergence. Considering the cities as the growth magnets and centers agglomeration of population, investments, economic activities, and city. So the cities are becoming highly sensitive due to exposure to climate change and are also becoming platform to address the climate change related issues. Therefore, to safeguard all resources, tangible and intangible, cities need to come up with the framework for identifying and implementing climate actions, both mitigation as well as adaptation, to reduce the GHG emissions and increase climate resilience. In specific to India, our cities have experienced extreme events due to increase in precipitation or rainfall. The incidents come across in my mind is the Mumbai floods, the Bangalore floods in 2013, Surat and China floods in 2015, and the current events of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, including ongoing pandemic and the amount of devastation these events have created is a reminder to cities to emphasize on climate-centric actions and build effective evidence-based plans for cities. Therefore, we will be focusing on mitigation measures such as climate action plan, climate self-assessment tool, and also we are going to look at the carbon market opportunities, which is extremely interesting as it was formed with the aim of driving finance to activities that reduce greenhouse gas emissions over the time. Volunteering carbon market has evolved and matured into a robust and effective means to tackle climate change by driving resources to projects which deliver independently verified and additional emissions reductions on a global scale. With this context, I am pleased to introduce the expert panelist speakers we have today with us, who will be focusing on way to mitigate GHG emissions in cities with 3 steps of conducting an assessment, developing an action plan, and implementing GHG emission reduction measures. We're also going to have, we'll see if we are going to have a demonstration of the self-assessment tool. The experts will also share their experience on developing the climate action plan in cities, and we are also going to discuss in detail about leveraging carbon grids. So I welcome our eminent panelist speakers, Dr. Rajan Chedabant, Mr. Vibhor Sood, Ms. Avni Agarwal, Mr. Kundan Banwal, Mr. Jay Kumar Gaurav. A very warm welcome to all of you.
Manju, your screen is please.
Yeah, I think Amanjot's screen has frozen. I think she lost network.
Am I audible?
Yes, Manjari. we can
Yeah,
hear
so
you.
I think there's some office net issues. So I think Aman is just trying to reconnect. Just give us a moment.
Sure.
Hi Manju, I think Amanjot was able to set the context of the meeting, and I think the experts are also being introduced to the forum. So without much delay, I think we can invite Dr. Rajan from Director Kochi, CHEAD, to start with the presentation on Kochi Climate City Action Plan. Sir, over to you.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for inviting Kochi to be part of this. Am I audible? Is there some issue? I mean, so
Now it's fine, sir. Earlier it was echoing. Now I think it's fine.
okay, I mean, I really thank you all for inviting the city of Kochi to be part of this very important discussion. And I'm going to present whatever we've been doing, what are the scenario as far as Kochi is concerned in the context of climate change, and whatever actions that we have been carrying out, and our plans for the future, and then finally the market outlook, which we haven't really dealt much into, but then I would like to learn from this session what we can really do in that front, the carbon credit and all that sort of things. So I'll basically present some of these empirical data or what is happening on ground in Kochi as far as climate change is concerned. So I'll just switch off my camera and I'll go for the presentation. So this is basically the first slide here. It shows the kind of increase in annual temperature in Kochi and year-wise, and there is a real increase in the day temperature, especially the summer months, and some days it's almost sultry and kind of, it's certainly not touching the European kind of standards which we get everyday news from Europe now, like, but it's not as bad as that, but it's certainly increasing. There is a gradual increase. And the other thing is, like, Kerala is a state and Cochin as a city, like we experience 4 to 5 months of rains, but that rain, there is this change. There is a change in the pattern of rain, like that prediction, the earlier prediction, the planning, it's all been kind of it's not there, like, we cannot predict the rainfall pattern, and in some days you get a lot of rains, and then next couple of days it's very hot. So we really experience the change in the rainfall pattern as well. And then flooding, for instance, like as I said, like in one day you will have like heavy rain happening, and kind of in one day, like last year, in one day it was 200 millimeters of rain, and we never experienced such a scenario. But like we are really witnessing climate change in Kochi, and we actually, like, we talk about mitigation, we talk about resilience and all those things, but it's not really started reflecting in our planning, in our action. And I think, like, it all came much before. It started affecting us much before we really started planning and countering the climate change. So, and this here, like, this slide shows like the kind of temperature, the trend in increasing in the kind of heat, the day temperature, and heat waves almost become like common in Kochi, and sunburns and sunstroke, like, and especially Kochi is a place where, like, you have a lot of construction activities happening. And nowadays, like the workers every day come up with a lot of complaints about like sunburn and sunstroke. And actually, these workers, most of these workers are migrant workers. They come from more temperate regions, but still they kind of complain about day temperature and sunburn and sunstroke. And Kochi is in the Nagaland district, and some of the recent studies says that it is increasing 2 to 4 degrees, especially in the months of April, May, the summer peak of summer. And you can see in this slide, you can see like there are like places within the city, what we call as urban heat islands, when a lot of, as I said, like a lot of construction happening. You have a lot of high-rise buildings, you have a metro running, and all this is causing like heat, creating heat islands within the city. And if you really move, say, 10 kilometers away from the city center, you really will feel, you actually will feel the change in the day temperature. and that is a scenario here in Kochi in all these three, the day temperature, the rainfall pattern, yeah. And then, like, the third part is the sea level rise. We are a coastal city. Kochi is almost on the mean sea level. Some part of the city, 20 to 30% of the city is below the sea level, and then we get to learn that, like, there is an increase in the sea level. And actually, the whole study started in 1990s by the Oak Ridge Lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, sponsored by USAID. They did a detailed study on the impact of sea level rise on Kochi, and they said, like, if their report said that if there is going to be point less than a meter, like, if that's going to happen, and then the whole Kochi is going to be submerged. The entire Kochi is going to be inundated. And a recent study, especially by Terry, said, like, that 87.5 millimeter rise will be over the next 50 years, and every year it is 1.8 millimeters. So we are experiencing all these three important aspects of climate change: the change in rainfall pattern, because it rains 3 to 4 months, and if there is a change, it's going to kind of jeopardize the entire planning, not just planning, life. And then heat island, like, when the temperature increases, then there is going to be more consumption of water. And as it is, like, there is the lot of contamination of groundwater, and there is scarcity of water. Then we are bringing water from far off places, like, 20 kilometers north and 20 kilometers south east from these 2 points, and still it's not sufficient. There is a lot of gap between the supply and demand already existing. And if there is going to be a kind of increase in temperature, how are we going to face even this basic need, the water? So we are, as a city, we are facing serious issues as far as climate change is concerned. Yes. Yeah. 1 second. I'm experiencing. Yeah. Okay. So, and then, like, this is the map of the city of Kochi, and you can really see that the red mark, like, the highly risk, especially water related. If there is a kind of increase in the sea level rise, and and all these three that I've been talking about, like, these are the areas that are going to be really in issue. They are the vulnerable areas within the city, and it's not just this area, like, and we, after this, we did another study. It says, like, the entire Fort Kochi Matanjeri area, the Anagulam area, or the areas close to the water source would all be in serious trouble if there is going to be a slight increase in the water level. And actually, like, these are some of the kind of uh, uh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Rashan, you're audible. Yeah.
Okay, so the projected mean temperature may show net increase. I mean, actually, there is a real increase. This is showing, like, the real increase compared to 1970 to 2000, and now 2015 to 2044. The kind of increase that is going to happen. And the rainfall, like, there is certainly going to be, there's not much of an increase as far as rainfall is concerned. It's only 0.5 millimeters, but the pattern, the change in the rainfall pattern, that is causing a lot of issues. We had, like, 2018 and 2019, 2 consecutive years, we had flooding in the city. It's not because there was more rains, but, like, the change in the rainfall pattern, as I said, just in one day, like, we had 200 millimeters of rainfall. And and then the third point is that, like, the projection of, like, 100 to 200 millimeters of rise in the sea level over the next 100 years. And this basic statement about all these three things that we are experiencing as far as climate change is concerned in the in the Kochi context. And like, what are these what are the urban sectors that is like that we go to address, or we go to need immediate intervention as far as climate change is concerned. And first of all, it's like water supply, say like I've explained a little about the water supply things. The gap is different. The gaps in different sectors such as water supply, solid waste management, sewage system, drainage, street lighting, transport, urban biodiversity, housing, and all these things are leading to climate change. Actually, this gap, like water or solid waste, is in a major thing. Like the lot of issues that the city is facing as far as solid waste management is concerned. Sewage, actually, Kochi is one city. We have only 1.5 square kilometers of sewage network. Rest all are like sanitary, what do I call, septic tanks, like septic tanks. Like we have three-chambered septic tanks, and certainly, like there is going to be like water, wastewater going out of the third chamber of this septic tank, and the sewage is one sector that is causing a lot of issues. And street lighting, we are Kochi is one place, or Kerala is one place. We can really explore a lot on solar, but we haven't done much on that. We have just started doing it. And transport, I mean, we'll come into detail of all these things, and then kind of biodiversity, housing, and these are the sectors that we causing a lot of leading to or causing in climate change, or like pushing things in a wrong way. So, and yeah, and like then I'll examine like the urban services and emissions that are leading to kind of climate change. Yeah, so when the sector-wise energy usage is analyzed, actually during here I said it is 2018 and 19, but it was 19 and 20. Actually, transportation sector uses the highest energy, about uh, kind of so that is a kind of energy used by a single sector. And transportation sector also contributes to the highest GHG emission when compared to all other sectors that we've been talking about. Yeah, and emission per capita, like it's 2.63 ton carbon dioxide per capita, and 10.5 carbon dioxide per household, and 17.29 per square kilometers. And this is the kind of like this is a major indicators of indicator of what is really happening on ground in Kochi. Yeah, and again, like the reason we have done a kind of vulnerability hotspot in Kochi, it's based on all the recent studies carried out, and the entire Kochi city like is vulnerable according to all the studies, all the recent studies, all the projections, and all the empirical data we have. So it's time that like the city seriously get into the climate change mitigation strategies, include everything in its plan, in its program. Climate change as a major thrust area as far as our kind of plan of action is concerned. And this slide basically is like it shows the energy use, like hydropower, and Kerala is one state where still hydropower is the major source of energy. And this slides talk about carbon emission from the hydroelectric power usage. It's 0.13 kilogram that's happening around. The next one. And we are coming up with the support of all these agencies, GIZ, WRI, ICLEI, even NIUA, and all the agencies. Like, we are coming up with projects that will help us address the climate change issues. For instance, like, we are preparing we were part of the Solar City project, and we have working on that. We have identified a lot of projects as far as Kochi as a solar city is concerned, and we are trying to implement that. We are trying to include that in our annual budget and implement as in small scale. And with the support of WRI, we are doing a zero carbon building project. They have prepared the policy document. We are waiting for from the state government to get the go ahead to do that, to implement include that in our building laws. And we are also doing a building efficiency accelerator project. It's again with the support of the WRI. And the Kochi Metro Rail is kind of announced, doing converting all the public buildings into solar powered buildings. And the Kochi Smart Mission Limited is converting the lighting into LED lighting system. And and as I said, all the installation of a top solar system for all the that has been already carried out. So we are trying to do some projects in order to address this issue. And even state level, there are many projects that's happening with the support of the state government. We are going to have a waste to energy plant, a most modern waste to energy plant. And the Kerala State Electricity Board is kind of giving a lot of incentives to individual houses to come up with rooftop solar panels. And there is another project called Nagara Jyoti project, which is an all India project that's happening in the state. And this is a little about the transport sector, annual carbon dioxide emission in Kochi due to vehicle movement is 7.65 million per ton. And and then in the transport sectors, we have kind of introduced a lot of projects Eco Logistics is another project with the ICLA. We are going to convert all the freight movement through water and then through e-mode. And then through the mobilized university, we are trying to convert some of the roads as e-mobility corridor. And the Kochi Metro Rail is coming up with a lot of green transport initiative and non-motorized transport plan. And then we have public biking, and we are kind of encouraging a lot of pedestrian making a lot of pedestrian infrastructure that more people walk and use less motor vehicle, and and all that things we are trying to introduce. And with the support of WRI, we now kind of introducing a transformation.
Dr. Rajan, sorry.
Yeah.
Dr. Rajan, sorry to interrupt, but I'd request you if you can, wrap up your.
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are many projects with the city as is carrying out, and the state with the support of the state government as well. We with the support of the GIZ, we are introducing an e-auto program, where we are kind of all these tick-ticks into e-tick-ticks. We have already done some, and in another 1-2 months we will have another 100. And even our water transport, we are going to convert into that. And then a lot of deforestation happening, and we are trying to address that all through all the eco restoration projects. There is a major project called Interact Bio, supported by ICLEI. and then like the climate smart city project by GIZ, and even WRI cities for forest, and a lot of projects happening. And now we have there's a noble project called Kochi Eco Challenge. Kochi Eco Challenge is a project where the students can come up with projects in their region, in their area, projects that can fight climate change in their region. The city would fund it, and that is Kochi Eco Challenge. We have come up with so many projects like that. So and we have like issues everywhere, like what every sector, what are the issues and how we are going to do that. So I have detailed all that. I can send you all this presentation. And I have also made the intervention, whatever intervention we should do in each sector. For instance, water supply and sewage and all that we have. I have detailed over here. I'll send you all that thing. And what? Yeah, sewage, and I'll not go into detail of all this because of the lack of time. And this is the kind of change in the land use pattern of Kochi from 1984 to 2017. Just a small little video, and okay, I'll skip that as well. And yeah, with this, what do I want to say in this forum? We are also very keen on the indoor model. I've heard that in indoor at earn some 50 lakhs rupees through carbon credit. And how can we really do a city like Kochi? We have many projects, so many eco restoration projects happening in solid waste management, so which we are coming up with a lot of projects. And how can we really convert that all into an revenue generating or an economic model? I mean, how can we kind of uh, earn some money through all these program like carbon credit? That is something, that's the kind of help we need from this kind of forum. With that, I will kind of conclude my presentation on Kochi's the local climate change act. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. I think we have one question at the chat box. To you, it's like it is predicted to be more, the sea level rise is predicted to be more on eastern coast than western. Then what tune of local activities can help reduce this?
I
So
didn't
one
get
of
you.
the party,
I didn't get you. I
so
didn't get you.
one of the participant asked this question, that sea level rise, it is predicted to be more on eastern coast than western. What tune of local activities can help reduce this?
See, like first of all, like Kochi, we have almost 48. Yeah, we have almost 48 kilometers of waterfront and mainly canals. And the first priority, the short term, the immediate priority is to kind of reinvent the canal. Most of these canals are now become drainages, like what do I say? And because of encroachment, because of poor planning, and we will have to regain them. We will have to bring back all these canals so that the rise can be absorbed by these canals and water system, inland water system. Actually, Kochi backwater is the second biggest Ramsar site in the country, and we will have to really do something to conserve this Ramsar site. We shouldn't lose it to the big construction building. And there is a lot of reclamation is happening, and we shouldn't allow that. We should actually the first priority is to kind of regain the water water sink, where water, all the rising water can get into. We have a natural system. We go to regain that. That is the immediate priority. And that's a short term, but long term we have many other things to do. And I think we will have to learn from good practices like Singapore, how they kind of built the city, like the measures that they have taken, the sustainable measures they have taken, and the climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies cities like Singapore adopted. I think we will have to learn from all that. But a huge chunk of our annual budget should be kind of allocated for climate change mitigation, or rather climate change mitigation should be one of the priorities of the city for sure.
That's true, and it's very. I must say I personally like your presentation, and especially that how the vulnerable zones have been marked out, and considering the change in the rainfall pattern, which is evident not only for the Kochi floods but most of the major cities nowadays. One of the question, if I may ask, is that this whole process must have involved multi-stakeholders and engagement with the different stakeholders. So, how Kochi Municipal Corporation how city has actually, combat with some challenges which may be involved in, bringing different stakeholders on board.
And, yeah. Yeah, Naju, that's a very valid question in the sense like, and what is the priority? I mean, we live in a democratic system, and see, like, and local governments all across the country, not just in India and South Asia, like on a firefighting mode, they have day-to-day kind of challenges: road, drinking water, waste management, sewage, so many other things like, and climate change may not be their immediate priority. And I think like we need to educate the people, the stakeholders, all levels of stakeholders, not just the articulate section, the educated, I mean like the policy makers, but even the common man. We'll have to really educate the common man that climate change is a threat. The very existence of the vulnerable, the poorest of the poor, even Kochi, if it floods, the poorest of the poor is suffered more than anybody else. So what happens? We'll have to really bring them, we'll have to educate them, we'll have to tell them there is this serious threat of climate change. The shortage of water is not just because Kerala Water Authority is not laying the pipeline proper, or they are not pumping in enough water. It's that, like, there is increase in the temperature, there is a lot of evaporation happening, and flooding. It's not because you haven't cleaned your drainage or canal, because there is a change in rainfall pattern. I think it's very important that you engage your stakeholders from the ward level. We have like a ward committees onwards. You will have to, and until and unless the people demand action that would address climate change, our political leadership is not going to do that. Because if the local people say, like, we need a big flyover, the political leaders would only build flyovers. They wouldn't, like, go invest a lot on revamping the canal. And if the canal will not bring them votes, they will not they will not invest their money and energy on revamping the canal. They would rather build a flyover that would further complicate the climate change scenario. So what you need to do is to educate the people. You'll have to carry the people along. You'll have to take the people along. You'll have to go to the people. You'll have to educate the councillors first, then go to the ward level. And you got to tell them that there is an imminent threat of climate change, which is going to sink your city, sink your life. So what do you really want to do? And then, like, there will be change in the priority. Your budget will have more projects on climate change mitigation than major construction, major flyovers and whatnot. So that is what we got to really do as a first step as far as policy is concerned. We got to really take people along. We got to educate the people. We have to make them understand that there is a climate change. Because what is happening is that in this forum we would discuss. We all know what's happening. Climate change, there's a threat. There is a 2 degrees Celsius temperature increase in Kochi. Not the common man. Common man is not bothered about it. He's bothered about the road next to his house. I think we will have to the theory and practice. We'll have to go into a praxis mode. We'll have to take people, policymakers, all of them, and they should also join in such kind of forums and express their opinion. Then only there is going to be change. There is going to be allocation for climate change mitigation. And yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. So, very well said that identification of the sectors and the various stakeholders which can be involved in the whole process, it's very crucial. So with that in mind, I would also like to draw everyone's attention to the other ways of emission assessment that can be available to the cities. And one of them is the online tool, which is known as Climate Smart Cities Assessment Tool, which is based on the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, and which is the first of its kind framework on climate relevant parameters for Indian cities, launched by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So the self-assessment tool follows the global protocol for community scale greenhouse gas emission inventories to estimate indicator-wise GHG emissions and provide mitigation potential based on progression levels and mentioned in Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. This tool can also help cities to design and locate climate solutions within the Smart Cities mission. So for this session, we have two speakers with us today, Mr. Vibhor Sood and Ms. Avni Agarwal. Mr. Vibhor Sood is technical expert, climate and infrastructure, GIZ Climate Smart Cities project in India, and has over 12 years of experience on various issues related to solid waste management, wastewater management, air pollution, and urban climate change across the three tiers of urban governance at national, state, and city level. He has worked closely with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Smart Cities Mission Division to conceptualize, develop, and implement climate smart cities assessment framework since its inception in 2019. He's a member of National Solid Waste Association of India and Indian Association of Air Pollution Control. And our other speaker for this session is Ms. Avni Agarwal. She's a senior project associate with a climate program at WRI-India. She is currently involved in developing city-level climate action plans of Mumbai and 7 smart cities in Madhya Pradesh. She contributed for conceptualization and development of City Smart Cities Assessment Framework. Apart from being involved in creating city-level inventories and climate action plans, she supports efforts to build capacity and mainstream climate action in subnational levels. A warm welcome to both the speakers, and over to you.
Thank you, Amanjot. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to present in this forum. Avni, may I request you to just share your screen? Thank you so much. So, thank you, Dr. Rajan. Very well made presentation, sir. And I think with the paucity of time, we could not listen more from you. But I'll request each of our participants in this forum to further, go through your presentation. I think that would be a great learning how a city plan and prioritize and actually take action with respect to climate change. Now moving forward from the action part, let's see how we do the prioritization in terms of what this tool I'll try to present to you, and my co-presenter Avni will demonstrate to you. Avni, next slide, please. So before moving ahead, I just want to briefly touch upon this Climate Smart Cities project. So this is a project funded by German Federal Ministry of Environment, BMU, and this is anchored with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs Smart Cities mission. And the objective of this project is to anchor climate-friendly solutions for urban infrastructure projects and area-based development. The project is working with the ministry since June 2018, and we have one more year to go. NIUA, DIFU, which is the German Institute of Urban Affairs, and Technical University of Berlin are members of the implementation partners for this project. You can see on the screen the 3 cities, Kochi, Coimbatore, and Bhubaneswar, which where we are supporting. We are supporting on broad areas. You can see it on the screen. And at national level, as Amanjot said, we are supporting ministry along with NIUA from the very beginning for the conceptualization and development of the assessment framework, and for the later part, for the implementation part, WRI along with few other organizations join us for the implementation. So more or less, it was a very collective effort while implementing this. And maybe Avni, next slide. And then why this assessment framework tool, which Amanjot briefly tell you about, that this is based on the GPC, and this is the location where you can find it on the NIUA website. This was launched by Honorable Minister the day CSCF 2.0 results were announced. Avni, next slide, please. So while touching upon why this tool, so you see traditionally the accounting of the GHG emission was never kept under the purview of urban local bodies, but since this framework was launched, there was a felt need for a tool wherein cities can see and check how much their actions are contributing, or how much if they take certain action or they plan and certain action, what are the potential greenhouse gases emission which they will avoid. So this was the kind of idea which our Joint Secretary asked us to prepare, and then later we joined hand with WRI to develop this tool. So if you see, it supplements Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, and it uses data which is already collated in the framework to calculate if you've done the action, it will calculate the actual GHG emission, or if you plan to do an action or you select any performance evaluation level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it will give you a potential greenhouse gases emission that your action would avoid. So what you'll do, it is giving you a quantifiable emission-based evidence to prioritize your climate actions. And also this is supporting cities in planning and executing climate-oriented actions across the 5 categories we are covering up. Next slides of me. So there are a few limitations and assumptions to it. First, that to contextualize and simplify the calculation for the Indian context of what was already given in the GPC, the tool uses additional India-specific studies and report or document that my co-presenter will present to you during the course of the presentation. So for the specific indicators, we have some default value which are taken from the report for calculation of the GHG emission. But also the second part, the important part, the tool does not provide a city level inventory or a sector level inventory. The tool is very specific to tell you whatever the action which is envisaged under the framework. If you do that particular action, this is the amount of GHG which will be mitigated, or if you have done certain action, that this is the GHG emission you have mitigated. And the emission numbers which are being presented depends, the reliability depends on how accurate your information which you are punching into the tool. So the more reliable is your information, the more accurate will be the result, and the tool will be kind of more useful for the cities for prioritizing the action. Next slide, sir. So I think I've briefly touched upon what the tool is all about. Now I request my co-presenter, Ms. Avni Agarwal from WRI, to take you through the demonstration. Avni, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for both. So thanks for setting the context. And I mean, I'll now just walk us through the tool and, just talk about its features, how we can use it to estimate emissions, mitigation potential, prioritize actions. I mean, this is just the main dashboard. So once you register and log in, this is what shows up as the main dashboard. Just to sort of give an overview of the different menu and sub-menu options, there are 6 main menu options. The About the Tool page has links to the user guide and the methodology that we've used to sort of develop this tool. The Data Entry tab has 6 sub-menu options, the City Information tab, and 5 CSCAF sectoral tabs. The Emissions and Analysis tab menu, it has 7 tabs, which includes the overall emissions and the 5 CSCAF sectoral tabs. And along with that, there's also a tab on priority areas, which is, so the priority areas are based on the emission estimates. And the fourth menu option is the Potential Emission Reduction tab, which again has 6 sub-menu options. 5 for the sectoral tabs, and the first one is the performance evaluation level form, which is based on the framework and which cities have to fill based on the final results of the assessment round. And finally, the Generate button report, it allows users to convert the information on the tool into a PDF report. And I mean, any additional notes that the city or the user might want to enter can be added using the Notes tab, which is the last one. So this is the About the Tool page, where you can find the user guide in the two yellow arrows point to the user guide and the methodology that's been used to develop the tool. So there is an option to go through a mini user guide, which is on the page itself, which is on the tool itself, or users can download a more detailed user guide, which looks like this. And this will be a detailed sort of PDF document, and I would encourage anybody who is looking to use the tool to go through the detailed guide before sort of, starting the whole process. The methodology page, it details out the method, the formulas and the documents that we've used to come up with and the emission factors that we've used to sort of come up with the overall methodology for the tool. So it's predominantly based on, as both Amanjot and Vibhor mentioned, it's based on JG protocol for cities, but to tailor the framework, to tailor the tool to the framework and to Indian cities, we have used some assumptions. And so, I mean, to know those assumptions and to know the data that we've used, the default numbers that we've used, you could go through the methodology document. It's a pretty detailed guide. So, I mean, as Vibhor mentioned, this is not an inventory. It's an attempt to estimate emissions for specific indicators and activities mentioned in the framework. But the framework has both qualitative and quantitative indicators. The tool specifically uses quantitative indicators of the framework to estimate emissions. So these include energy derived from renewable sources, electricity consumption in the city, fossil fuel consumption, efficient street lighting, green buildings. These are all indicators under the energy and green building sector. Under the urban planning, green cover, biodiversity sector, we're looking at the proportion of green cover indicator. Under mobility and air, we're looking at the clean technology shared vehicles indicator. Under water, we're looking at non-revenue water and wastewater and water supply management systems. And finally, in the waste sector, we're looking at emissions from waste processing, municipal waste processing. So this is sort of a summary of the indicators that we've tried to cover in the tool. So the data entry tab, as I mentioned, has 6 submenu options. So the first one is the city information tab, which sort of captures general parameters on GDP, of course, name of the city, state, land area, population, GDP. And as you can see, the state and the city population autofills. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible in some data entry forms. So cities or the user doesn't have to manually input too much of the information. The energy and buildings data entry tab, the form captures information on parameters that are already part of the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, except for the last 2 indicators on street lighting and green buildings, where users must provide additional information on electricity consumption or energy consumption for these indicators. The green cover data form, it captures, again, the same parameter that is mentioned in the framework, which is on proportion of green cover. However, the tool also provides an option for cities to, or for users to enter data on more specific kind of green cover in the city. So whether, so the framework will restrict itself to the amount of green cover in the city, but if users or cities have more detailed information on whether how much of the area, how much of that green covers dense forest, open forest, vegetation, wetlands. These are all classifications that can be detailed out in the data form. And just to sort of help users, we have this question mark symbol on the top right, which sort of gives more information in terms of definitions. and how to help users classify the data they have better. So the mobility and air quality tab, it captures fuel-wise number of buses, four-wheelers, three-wheelers, two-wheelers, ferries. And along with that, and this is information that is already being captured in the framework, but along with that, the tool is also asking for information on annual vehicle kilometers traveled by each of these different modes, which is sort of an additional parameter compared to what's already in the framework. So for that, we've again sort of provided an information box that users can use by clicking that question mark box on the top right. It sort of provides, it lets users know what the different methods are to estimate average vehicle kilometers traveled figure, using like different sort of parameters. So, using average trip length or number of trips, average route length, route frequency, some of these. So a combination of these. So there are different formulas which can help users sort of come up with an estimate of what the VKT for every mode could be. So in the water management data form, we've tried to cover 3 indicators on non-revenue water. It's the same as what is mentioned in the framework. So, total water put into the transmission and distribution system, total water sold. But for the wastewater and water supply systems indicators, users need to provide information on electricity consumption, additional electricity consumption data for these for water, wastewater pumps and water supply pumps. So apart from that, in the non-revenue water indicator, cities can also, so here, for example, it's a good example of how we've tried to put in a default sort of number. So here it says electricity required to supply 1,000 liters of water by municipal authorities is 2.13 kilowatt hours. And this is sort of a national average. And it will be a default figure. But again, if users have, but every city based on, its topography, geography, based on where its water sources are, will sort of have a different value for, the amount of electricity required to sort of supply water. So if users do have information on this kind of parameter, they can override these kind of default figures that we've sort of built into the tool. So on waste management, the data form, it lets users calculate emissions from management of municipal solid waste through dump sites, biological treatment, and incineration. So these parameters that you see, they were part of the first version of the framework, but because the new framework, it uses Swachh Sarvekshan data. We haven't been able to adapt the second version, but we've retained the parameters from the first version to allow users to estimate waste emissions. So again, for the waste sector also, we have this information box, which sort of gives a definition on landfills. This is again, after you filled in all the data, there is an overall emissions tab that users can sort of look at. It gives emission estimates by sector and indicators. There are also specific sector specific emissions tabs. So it gives more detailed sort of emission numbers. So I mean, one can see, for example, in indicator 3, which fossil fuel is leading to what kind of emissions in the city. This is again the emissions and analysis tab for the water resource management sector. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. So along with the emissions, the sectoral emissions and the overall emissions tab, there's also the priority areas tab, which sort of based on the final emission estimates, it helps it helps users identify which activities are high emitting activities in the city, and where a city can possibly try to direct more of its efforts, or try to direct its efforts to sort of mitigate a greater amount of emissions. So based on the estimated emissions, the tool lists out indicators in a descending order of priority. Um, um, so I mean, Vibhor had mentioned, that along with the emission estimates and mitigation and prioritization, we've also tried to add this additional feature of being able to estimate potential emission reduction for each of these indicators. So to sort of to estimate the potential emission reduction for every indicator for each of these activities, users will have to input what the current level is. So again, these are based on the CSCF performance evaluation levels, right? Which are sort of there are 5 levels, and at the end of every assessment, cities can be placed on, from level 1 to level 5 based on the description. So whether at level 3 RE derived from renewable sources would be between 5 to 10%, and at level 4 it would be at 10 to 15%. So you can place where the cities are at every indicator, on every indicator, and based on this form, the tool sort of gives an estimate of what the potential emission reduction could be of moving from one performance evaluation level to the next level. So for example, on your screen you can see, if a city it manages to, or if a city tries to reduce its non-revenue water from 30% to below 20%, the potential emission reduced would be about 4,000 tons of CO2e. So this is just a brief gist of what I've shown you, what the 3 major outputs are of the tool in terms of emissions, prioritization, and emission reduction potential.
Avni, sorry to interrupt, but you have to wrap up.
Yeah. Okay. So just this is just users can also download a self-assessment report, which is a PDF report at the end. Yeah, this is the end of my presentation, and you can contact any of us to sort of know more about the tool and to sort of help you. We can help you use the tool better. This was a small video actually, which was on the tool, but I think maybe we'll just put it in the chat box, Vibhor, since we're running out of time. And I would just encourage all participants to just have a look. It kind of in 2 minutes gives a gist of what how users can use the tool. So yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Avni. Thanks, Vibhor. We have a couple of questions in the chat box, but I think we are going to take it in the session end. So I'll quickly move to the next session that we have. So in this presentation, we looked at the tool, and which is in the public domain, by the way, and which can be used by the cities or academia to see the current emissions and seek potential emission reductions. So what else city can do? And so our next session is on such innovative way which can be used to reduce GHG emissions and creating opportunities while doing so. So voluntary carbon market opportunity and the global outlook. For this session, um, we have for this session we have with us the climate change professional. Um, uh, we also had Mr. Konda Burnwal, but he couldn't join because he's stuck in traffic. But here we have Mr. Jay Kumar Gaurav, who is climate change sector professional with more than 13 years of diverse experience, and with NGOs and bilateral, multilateral organization and private sector. He currently works at GIZ in India as a senior advisor. Climate change and circular economy, working on the project, including global carbon markets and nationally appropriate mitigation action, that's also known as NAMA. Support project titled Waste Solutions for a Circular Economy in India and Strategic Partnership for the Implementation of Paris Agreement. He has published several research papers and articles on climate change, carbon markets, and circular economy related issues. His research interests are interdisciplinary and relate to the political economy and technology and finance. A very warm welcome to Mr. Gaurav, and over to you. Mr. Gaurav, if you are speaking, we can't hear you. We cannot hear you, Mr. Gaurav. I would request you if you can, yeah. I would request if you can join back. Uh, it will help you. I'm assuming the same glitch I also faced, but once you rejoin, I hope you'll be able to. We'll be able to hear you. Mr. Gaurav, I request you if you can rejoin. I apologize to our participant. There is some technical glitch we are facing. So, Mr. Gaurav, the expert of the session, will join soon. Maybe Um, Mr. Gaurav, no, we cannot hear you. Can you use the headphones if that is possible? No, we can't hear you. Maybe the other way could be that you can use. Yes, I can hear something now.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So I'll just share my screen and you can confirm if you can see the screen. Is it
Yes, it's
visible, the
visible.
screen? Okay.
Yes,
So
it's
thanks
visible.
a lot for inviting me, and I'll just be very quick. So I work for GIZ, and particularly with relevance to this session, I work for the Global Carbon Market Project, which is commissioned by the German Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. And we have Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change as our nodal partner ministry. So our objective is to build capacity of public and private sector stakeholders, decision makers in particular, to use new market-based mitigation tools or market mechanisms as well. And as you might be aware that the demand for voluntary carbon credits is increasing significantly, because more and more companies, you must have heard that they want to become carbon neutral or reach net zero. But in the process of reaching net zero, or let's say for emissions today, they try to reduce as much as they can themselves, and whatever are the residual emissions, they buy offsets, which are called voluntary carbon credits. So as a project, we do a lot of things. We provide institutional support to MIFCC. For instance, the National CDM Authority establishment was partly supported by the Global Carbon Market Project. We provide a lot of policy advisory, and we do a lot of studies related to carbon markets and their future potential analysis, which are like sector-based analysis of what works, what doesn't work. And then we do a lot of training, capacity building, as well as stakeholder engagement. And we can also support project development in terms of providing advisory, technical advisory, whereas the implementation is the partner's responsibility. So just to highlight that although we are, as a country, there are so many policies in place to reduce emissions, and we also heard about cities taking up climate change mitigation action. There, as on the whole, our emissions are rising, because as we have a higher income level, or as we have more production consumption, the emissions tend to rise because we need energy to produce the goods and services that we consume. Um, I will skip all these other details, but the point is that we are having a lot of mitigation related policies existing. But at the same time, certain types of fossil energy based production systems and uh, consumption of certain fossil fuels is increasing because of increasing demand and higher income levels. Now, looking at the history of global climate policy very quickly, we all know about the Berlin Commission report that sort of brought all this multilateralism and concept of sustainable development into picture. Then there was the Rio Earth Summit, which established the UNFCCC was established at this summit. Then in Kyoto in Japan, we had the Kyoto Protocol adoption, which sort of was the first time that carbon markets as an instrument were introduced. And in 2005, the European Union emission trading scheme started. So all this was basically government-driven policy action. The European Union established the emission trading system, but in parallel, companies and individuals said that, okay, we will also take some voluntary action. And that's where the voluntary carbon market concept came in and developed. We had COP15 in Denmark, which wasn't so successful. But in 2015, we had the signing of the Paris Agreement, which has created now a big momentum on climate action. And most of the countries in the world have committed some form of climate change mitigation action, including India, which has set very ambitious targets for renewable energy installation, for reducing emission intensity of the GDP, and as well as forest carbon sinks establishment. And of course, cities can contribute significantly to all the targets that we have as part of our NDC. Then there is a new mechanism that has come up. It's called CORSIA, Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. So as you know that it is very difficult to make an aeroplane run on electricity or to reduce emissions from an airplane because it uses fuel and they have reached high level of efficiency, but further efficiencies achievements are challenging. So what has been decided is that all the incremental emissions of airlines will have to be offset by purchase of carbon credits. And that's also supporting a lot this carbon market discussion. Right now, uh, we have all the issues related to Paris Agreement clear, and there is a Paris rule book being developed, except for Article 6, which is the rule or the article related to how the carbon market should work in the Paris Agreement era. So let's come back to the issue of carbon offset. And offset is basically a reduction or removal or avoidance. So it can be you have emissions, let's say you have a diesel generator, you remove the diesel generator, put solar, that's also an offset. If you're putting solar, then we can assume that if you put solar, maybe you would have put a diesel generator, or you would have put, or you would have used the grid electricity. So that's why it could be actual removal, actual reduction, or it could be a hypothetical baseline also, considering what is being installed in general. And then there is this concept of sink, like the trees, and there are some technologies also coming up which can capture carbon and store them in deep reservoirs, or in trees, it becomes part of the biomass. So a carbon offset represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So that's like uniform. Either it's a voluntary carbon market or compliance carbon market. An offset represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And then there are these characteristics or criteria that every carbon credit should meet. So they should be real reductions. They should be additional. What it means is that when you're reducing emissions, you should make sure that your emission reductions are not, or your financing is not supporting something that would have already happened. And then permanence is that it shouldn't be a reversible. For example, forest can catch fire. So the carbon dioxide stored will again go back in the form of CO2. To avoid that, we give temporary carbon credits in case of forestry. Then verifiable. So all types of carbon activity, emission reduction activities that you implement, there should be a means to verify that has it actually happened. Where is the data being stored? Can I retrieve that data and check that actually this much electricity, renewable electricity was produced, these many kilometers of transportation facility was provided using renewable energy or using electric vehicles, and then quantifiable and enforceable ownership. So in case of cities, suppose if city government, the urban local body is itself implementing a project, then city becomes the owner of that carbon credit that is generated because of that project. But if there is a private partner which is implementing the project on behalf of the city, then they are the owner. Uh, Sorry, slide is not moving. Yeah, so there's a difference between voluntary carbon market and mandatory carbon market. In principle, it is like mandatory carbon market is recommended by the government. It's a rule, and the companies have to comply, entities have to comply, and they have the rules are set by the government. Then it's a compliance-based carbon market. And voluntary carbon market is where you have independent standards like gold standard, Vera carbon standard. These are independent, not-for-profit organizations that regulate or make the rules of the game for voluntary carbon market. And in voluntary carbon market, there is no obligation on the buyer. Suppose if a company is buying VERs this year, they may not buy next year because it's not a legal mandate on them. They're doing it because they're a responsible corporate citizen, or they're as part of their environmental responsibility, or to support emission reductions in general, so that the world can meet Paris Agreement goals. So component terms, in terms of component, there's a baseline and project emissions and leakage emissions. So baseline is, suppose if I have a diesel generator, that becomes my baseline. I replace the diesel generator, I put a solar plant, and then it is a solar plant is also sort of using light from the grid or using the diesel generator for lighting in the night. for safety purpose, then that emission which is being caused is still, when I'm using the solar power plant, becomes the project emissions. And leakage emissions are basically when, because of my activity, somebody else started emitting greenhouse gas emissions. So I had a diesel generator, I sold it, and somebody else started using that diesel generator, then that's a simple example of leakage. And then there are different steps through which a project has to go before it can claim carbon credits. These steps are particularly validation, which is like an independent auditor checking the project, and then registration, which is the recognition of the project by the standard, like gold standard or WRI standard, and then monitoring of the project, then verification of the project, and then issuance. So it is like at every stage, there is a check, there is a documentation to support that the project is actually reducing emissions. And that is something that the cities would also have to do if they intend to access carbon credit, go through all these steps. Vintage year is in which year the emission reductions happen. MRV reports, you already understand. Crediting period is how long a project will reduce emissions, 5 years, 10 years. And then retirement of a credit is that once you have generated the credit and you sell it to a company that wants to offset its emissions, then they have to retire those credits. So you can't double use the carbon credit twice. This is the main slide, I would say, because it shows the key steps that every voluntary carbon market project has to go through. The first step is developing the project idea, and then you have to prepare a report of the project, just like a DPR. It's called a project design document, and then you take it to an auditor, which who validates the the project design document, and then this PDD along with supporting documents is submitted for registration. After the project is registered, you monitor the project. Then again, the auditor comes and checks the project, and then it's called verification of the project. And once you have verified the projects, you get issuance of the credits. And once you have the credit, it just shows like you have your digital banking account or your bank account online. It just like it shows, okay, you have so much money in your account. It will show, okay, you have 10,000 carbon credits in your account. And then once you sell it, the buyer will get those credits, and then he can retire those credits. Every credit has a unique serial number and a very strong IT-based system to make sure that they are not double counted or they are not misused. So there are these different participants. There's a market registry, there's a project developer, there's a buyer. Aggregators are people who will bundle small projects across different organizations or different cities, let's say, and then they will sell in bulk. Suppose if I'm from a large airline industry, then I would like to buy 1 billion credits, but a project is only of 100,000 credits. Then I'll go to an aggregator and say, can you help me buy 10 credits, 10 such 100,000 project credits. This I already explained, the baseline project and leakage emissions. So in terms of global outlook, I would say that there's a very positive outlook as far as voluntary carbon market is concerned. There's increasing demand, and there are different standards like the gold standard and WRI standard, which are the most common standard. And the volumes of carbon credits being issued is increasing in the recent years. Like in 2018, it was 98 million. 980 million, and now it is 1.4. Cumulative market volume has reached 1.3 billion. Sorry, it's 104 million and 98 million. That is the annual volume of credits that are traded in the voluntary carbon market. So we expect that it will grow 15-fold. So it is 100 million, 104 million in 2019. It will grow 15-fold, 15 times in the coming years. So there's a significant potential for cities, for private companies, for not-for-profit organizations to invest, to develop voluntary carbon market projects and earn additional revenue that can help in making the projects viable, as well as raise additional financing for higher levels of for scaling up, let's say. So that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Gaurav. I think it's very interesting to see this, and I think it's very important for cities to understand that how the both the voluntary carbon market works. Uh, I have a one quick question to you. Maybe if you can, emphasis on the same, maybe if you can highlight that what can be the possible systematic challenges for cities to implement such projects, and what measures that you suggest that cities can cater while doing the same. Hello, Gaurav, are you there? One thing we can do is, I think there is some technical glitch, but I think we can take the session 2 questions that some of participants had, and they have written in the chat box for the session 1 as well as for the session 2. If I go quickly, so yeah, so one question is regarding the SAT, is regarding the benchmarking. So the question is, so it's like the tool has all real data of technical details of specific landfills and their capacities, or does it work on a benchmark? So Avni or Vibhor, this was the question raised by this was the question raised by Mamta Jain. And we have another question as well. So, so if you can answer, then maybe we can take another question.
Sure. So in terms of when you say,
Avni, I cannot hear you.
Manjut, I tried to give the answer in the.
Thanks. Yeah.
am I audible?
Yes, you're
Yeah.
audible.
No, I was just saying, just to quickly answer Mamta's question, cities will have to fill in what type of landfill it is, and in case they don't know what landfill it is, then they can say that they don't know, like that's also an option in the tool. So then we'll use a default value. So the benchmarking is happening at the performance evaluation level, but users will have to input data for all sectors and for all indicators, at least parameters that the framework is asking for. So every city or every user will have like their own data set, right? To a certain extent, in the city information tab, numbers that we know will not change for a while, or information, for example, a city state will not change. So we've sort of put that information in, and that automatically shows up. Or the population will change, but in the short run, in these we've updated it. But for other data points, right, on, for example, waste, that's the question Mamta's asking. So like the user will have to input what kind of landfill it is, and if they don't know what landfill it is, that will also have to be mentioned.
You are on mute, Manjut.
Sorry, thanks, Avni. So, would you like to add something, Vibhor, or we can take up the next question?
No, I think I've tried to answer it in the chat box as well. So for a city, it's easy because they are participating in the assessment framework. So all those data, the input which is required for to be fed into the tool is available with them. But in case of any academia or any individual who is trying to or attempting this tool at his home, there he has to first get the data or assume the data for their city, or get the data from the open sources, and accordingly he can put it. But for the cities, it's very easy. They have the data. For the additional input parameters, they might need to dig in for further numbers, like what Avni explained. What is what your cost for pumping 1 MLD of water? So that figure you require to calculate the GHG emission from your NRW. So assessment framework will simply ask for the NRW percentage, but to convert into a GHG emission number, we need that, what is the cost of pumping or what is the energy consumed.
Yeah, thanks, Vibhor. So, Mamta do had another question for Gaurav, which seems very interesting. Mamta Jan, we will get back to you on this, and we'll try to cater all your questions. One question, if Dr. Rajan is there, there was for his session, there was on the in the chat box. It was that is there any action plan for Kochi Corporation to deal with sea level rise and other climate calamities with timelines, especially for projects like canal rejuvenation?
Yeah, and actually, like an issue like climate change, I think a local government, local self government, urban local ULGs cannot alone cannot really fight. It's not a micro ecozone issue. It's a larger macro ecozone issue. So we will have to have a regional approach, national and that kind of approach. But Kochi, within our limitations, like we have first of all, like given a lot of emphasis on canal rejuvenation. Right now, we all the major 6 canals with the support of the government of Kerala, like it's 2,000 crore project. We are investing 2,000 crore to rejuvenate all the canals and navigate them to preserve them like proper side walls and all that sort of things. So government has pumped in a lot of money, and the city is doing the work that is allotted to it. And in all fronts, like even like we do a lot of groundwater recharge project, little small works that we can really do. And even waste management front, waste management, we are trying to fill in all that gap, gap that is existing. And we are making sure that waste don't come on kind of in open. And we are kind of going to build a new waste to energy plant and sewage system, like we are going to kind of address. And biodiversity, we are doing a lot of BEEP, which is one city which is prepared a biodiversity registry, and we are now doing to preserve all the biodiversity that we have. So we are doing little small things, but we don't really have a concrete action plan as such, short term, mid term, long term. We really need support. I mean, actually we should also have a national policy and state policy, like wherein like the like for us, we have gender budgeting. We allocate 20% for gender issues, gender and children, like women and children in our annual budget. Like that, we don't really allocate climate fund, say like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50%. I think we should have such kind of directive, so that we will be forced, we will be constrained to kind of allocate that much of funding for climate related issues, fighting climate change. And I think like uh, we resilience. There are some cities with resilience officers, and Kochi and I don't think like there are too many cities. Not even Kochi, we don't really have a resilient officer. But then the thing is that we really need that kind of that level of an intervention. We really need proper planning, long term, short term. We really need states handholding, the national government's handholding in addressing all these issues. Kochi, I'll say, because we are facing all the 3 major, I mean, erratic rainfall pattern, as I said, like, the increase in day temperature and the sea level rise together will make our city disappear soon. So we will have to do something. But we need real support, not just from the national or state government, from institutions. GIZ is doing a lot of work, a lot of investment in Kochi. They're really holding our hand, and ICLEI, WRI, World Patel Institute, and UN Habitat. All of them are like really. I mean, they really do a lot of kind of educating process. Like they give a lot of training program to our officers. Our officers are aware. Like now it's going into the people. Like we are going to the people. We are going to. We are talking to them. Our counselors are aware of it. Like I mean now. I'll tell you the story if I have a little time. And when in 90s, like when Oak Ridge National Lab came over here, and we had this climate change as one of the agenda in our council, they said like we don't have time to look at the holes in the ozone layer. And we have like issues of water and wastewater over here where should people really bother about holes in the ozone layer. And now people realize that both are related. Your waste on the road, your waste generated, and the ozone, whatever is happening in the climate front is related. The councillors are aware of it. Like, now and it has to go to the people. So all of us together can really make a lot of change. And the knowledge that we get, the technical support we are having with all these institutions, GIZ, ICLA, WRI, all is really helping Kochi a lot.
Thanks, Dr. Rajan. Actually, I have one very important question, which I thought that it can be useful for our cities as well. You have special emphasis on the citizen-centric and inclusive approach to the climate change, and I've seen this in the model of Kochi, especially that how they have involved the elective representative, especially the mayors, and considering in us most of the Indian cities, the role of the mayors is very much confined. So what do you suggest, or what differences it made, or what do you suggest, what suggestive measures you think that why we should have more and more elective representatives or mayors should be involved in this process? What major difference that Kochi can make due to their presence?
Certainly in the sense like mayors, elected people's representatives, they are the guardians of the city, and they want their cities to survive. I mean, in that sense, like if once we really educate a councillor, a mayor, I'll tell you an example. An example when one of our former mayors, when he was elected as the mayor of the city, the first thing he did was he asked all his followers to put his hoardings and banners all across the city. And it was a kind of visual pollution for us, and we went and told him like, sir, don't do this. But he was not quite understanding, like, what visual pollution is all about. And then he had his first visit to Geneva to attend one of the UN conferences, and he saw no hoardings or posters all across the city, only in allotted places. And that was like something which was an education for him. And then he talked to people, then he understood, like, how beautiful the city is without all these hoardings and posters. And he came back to Kochi, and then he became a kind of missionary to remove all the hoardings and everything from the public sphere. And no officer can do it. No officer can do it, but a person with people support can make changes. And once a mayor is really convinced about the climate change and its impact, and he can communicate very easily, he can really take people along. And people there is a very good communication between the grassroots level people and political leadership, the decision makers. And in that way, if we really educate the decision makers, that are the mayors and the councillors, and it is going to be more effective than educating our officers. Officers have a lot of limitations, but then mayors and councillors would really make the difference. We have realized that during the floods in 2018 and the flood in 2019, and now they know, like, then when there is a flood in our council, there is to be a discussion. Because the discussion was always revolved around, like, not being efficiently cleaning the canals and drainages. And now there's climate change, and that we should do something about that aspect. So I think it is very, very important that we take people along, people's representatives along, mayors along, in order to address this. And I think we should restrict or limit our discussion only among the officers or the learned or the technical people. It will remain and somewhere if you don't really take it to the people or the real stakeholders, including the mayors and councillors.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajan. I think today's session has been very interesting, and if I can just take up the 3 points from all the 3 sessions, is that first is emphasizing more citizen-centric and inclusive approach to climate action mitigation measures, identifying both the short-term and long-term strategies to combat the same. Second is about the carbon offsets concepts and measuring the reduction and removal of the emissions and integrating the different criterias which can be like verifiable as well as the quantifiable and can be implemented in the cities. And third is about the tool which is progressive in nature, which to have more and more tools that calculate the GHG emissions and can incorporate both qualitative as well as the quantitative in nature. I definitely take these 3 points with me, and I hope all the participants are also able to take forward the topics as well as the discussions we did today. And I hope they can reflect and use the same in their respective work. So before we close, I'll take another few minutes. First, I'll request all the participants and the speakers, the speakers, if they can switch on their camera and we can have a snap, a brief snap right now, a picture, and then we will have a feedback session just after that, which is very short and very quick. I'll request every speaker to kindly switch on their camera so we can have a quick photograph. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now I would request you all just for the 3 to 5 minutes to log into Mentimeter from their smartphones, or if they have joined from desktop, they can use their browser. So I'd request Manjari if she can share her screen. Manjari, if you can please share the
Yeah,
screen.
I'm just sharing, Aman.
Yeah.
Is your screen visible?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. So I'd request everyone to kindly log into www.menti.com and use the code 42846453. So for the first slide, it's basically, so Manjari, if you can go to the first slide of the feedback. Yeah, so basically here we are going to rate the session on the following. So what do you think on the scale of 1 to 5, the 5 being the best? What do you think about the session that conducted today? So I would request everyone to kindly log into www.menti.com and add this code 42846453. I see one participant has rated this board. Thank you. I'd request everyone, the participant who are right now here, kindly provide their feedback. We can incorporate, we will take back your feedback and incorporate and try to improve our other sessions. Meanwhile, the Menti is going on. I would also like to thank everyone for joining. So if you can go to the next slide, Manjari. So what are your key takeaways from the session which happened today? Which part of the session which you have liked the most? The climate action plan from Kochi, about the climate smart cities assessment tool, and a very important and interesting topic we had in the afternoon is the volunteering carbon market. So what are the key takeaways from the sessions that happened today? In case anyone is facing any issue with the login, great. We have received the two inputs. So all the sessions are the most likable and voluntary carbon market was introduced. This is a very innovative and new topic, and I think it's very important, could be very important for the cities. Yes, self-assessment tool is very interesting and very handful, and it's in public domain, and cities can use it. The academia, they can use it. All the three sessions. So if we can go to the next question, Manjari. So any other suggestion to enhance the e-learning series experience? So basically, if anyone have any feedback or any suggestions, we'd request shorter session would be more helpful. Okay, point noted. We will try to have much more shorter sessions. And we'll try to incorporate your suggestions or inputs, which participants, whatever you will indicate here, we will try to incorporate that in coming next learning series. So while I'll hands up and the exercises, the startups who are applying the tools showcased. Yep. And having more hands up and hands up on the exercises. So we'll keep the screen open. And meanwhile, I would like to thank you everyone for joining us today. Next session is session 10 on learning series is on NMT GHG toolkit, which is on the next Thursday. And thank you all of our 5 speakers and the sharing your perspective and experience with us. It's very interesting learning. Thank you. And I would also like to give a special thanks to our participants, and we look forward to see you next week. And definitely we'll take up the suggestions and feedbacks and try and incorporate this to our next session. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.